The Office of Dispute Resolution, ODR, has been offering IEP facilitation since the early 2000s, when IEP facilitation came into being as a tool for special education dispute resolution. In the decades since its inception, IEP facilitation has been studied, researched, and techniques for effective facilitation explored. In the spring of 2015, ODR reinvested in its IEP facilitation program by bringing Tricia Bergen-Linton to Pennsylvania to provide training to Pennsylvania's IEP facilitators. Ms. Bergen-Linton is a facilitator from New Mexico with an extraordinary record of success using her IEP facilitation model. Listen to what Ms. Bergen-Linton has to say about the value of IEP facilitation from her decades of experience with this team-building technique.
Hi, my name's Tricia Bergen-Linton. I'm an IEP facilitator and a mediator. I also have a background of being a former special education educator as well as a special education administrator for a number of years with school districts. And since 1990, I've done consulting, IEP training, and IEP facilitation and mediation. Yeah, I think IEP facilitation sort of really came into existence in the early, 2000s, that it was actually tagged as IEP facilitation. I think it's grown tremendously since the early 2000s, and to where pretty much across the United States they've got an IEP facilitation process in place in just about every state. I think it's grown because of the success, that it is helpful. Teams do feel like they do accomplish the IEP that they need to. They have more productive meetings. I think that IEP facilitation can lend itself to getting teams to be more in a collaborative efforts. They may feel like we're never going to get through this IEP, we've been stuck in the past, we always get stuck, but it seems like once that neutral, impartial person comes into the picture and can assist with that collaboration, that they do seem to get through that IEP and are pleasantly surprised that they actually were able to get through that IEP and create an educational program for that child. I think sometimes there's a misconception that facilitators coming in as more of an advocate role or more of an expertise role, and that really is not the role of the facilitator. They're basically in charge of making sure process collaboration is followed, not necessarily expertise and going to quote the law or quote IDEA. That's not their role. So I think the misconception of an IEP facilitator sometimes is they are going to come in as the expert, when indeed that's not their role, or that they're coming in as an advocate for the family and going to be pushing certain, and assisting that parent with their agenda. And neither of those are correct, because they're not coming in to represent either party. They're coming in to really represent the IEP process itself and make sure that process is a collaborative process and everyone is heard.
Because IEP facilitation is fairly new to special education dispute resolution, there are often many questions about it. ODR has prepared a video on exactly how IEP facilitation works, which can be found on the ODR website. However, there may be remaining concerns about using a dispute resolution tool which is not familiar to families and schools. Listen to Tom Frost, one of ODR's facilitators, address some of those concerns.
Hello, I've been asked to speak to you as someone who has served as both a special education director as well as a facilitator of IEPs. And to begin, I would like to say to you that facilitation should be seen as one more tool in your IEP toolbox. The facilitation really should be serve as a collaborator along with the IEP team chair, and then you at the local district clearly maintain control of the process as is required by law. I know that there are some of you who would hesitate, but I can assure you that the statistics demonstrate an increased level of IEP completion with use of the facilitation process. It's important to recognize that communication may be stressed, if not entirely broken. But facilitation of IEPs can lead to a reopening of the dialogue between yourselves and the parents. That's a very important part of it. So it's also important to realize that facilitation is neutral. It's not a part of advocacy, but rather the goal of facilitation is the completion of an IEP. That alone, not advocacy.
The IEP facilitation process is beneficial even when both parties are represented by counsel. Listen to attorney Jane Williams discuss her viewpoint about effective facilitation services as part of her school law practice.
I think one question that would come to immediately come to mind would be, is this going to be a waste of time? Is this a colossal waste of time to be sitting there with someone who supposedly doesn't have any ownership of the process itself? At the same time, what I'm hearing is that while there's not an ownership in a running of the meeting, the facilitator's role is to facilitate that communication, to get those parties talking. I don't see how that's ever a threat to any process, assuming that that discussion is civil. And the other part of it too is a lot of times there's an awful lot of baggage and history that has led up to why we're sitting in that room in the first place with a facilitator, right? And hopefully that facilitator is skilled enough to be able to be explaining to whomever it is that has that past, that while that is relevant to the reason why we happen to be sitting here with the facilitator's presence, it's not relevant and helpful to moving forward with the resolution of that issue. Sometimes when you're hearing that from a third neutral party, it comes across somewhat differently, and maybe that will be heard, and then the process will move forward.
Dr. Nancy Giacomini, one of ODR's facilitators, describes the role of the facilitator and the value she sees in this tool for building more effective team partnerships.
So for me as an IEP facilitator, what I value about the process and the feedback that we get after the process is that it's an opportunity for IEP teams to invite in trained, neutral facilitators, people to share in that space and simply help the parties in whatever ways they need to make that the most effective process possible for them. In terms of conflict resolution across a spectrum, facilitated meetings are among the most effective ways to resolve conflict. And we do that in a number of ways. I may come in and simply be a calming presence. We will have prepared to the degree that our key parties have invited me to do that preparation. And when I come in, I'll have a sense of what we're there to talk about and what the team hopes to complete that day. With the team's consent and interest, what we might do together is look at and talk about ground rules and how we want to engage one another and how the team wants to be together to be most effective. I will tend to and work with the team around the table to make sure that airtime is being balanced. And then we'll check in with one another to make sure that everybody around the table is and has an opportunity to actively participate in whatever way that looks like to them. Sometimes a facilitator will gauge what's going on in the room, and if it's constructive, we may intervene or interject very little. If the team looks to a facilitator to help move forward or move from a past orientation where they might be getting bogged down to a present and future orientation of where they want to go, a facilitator can be looked to write up on a whiteboard or make use of any of the many skills that we bring in that either the team hasn't had an opportunity to use, maybe they don't have the skill set for that activity yet, and we might model things or introduce things that will be helpful in real time and can also be used down the road by the team when a facilitator is not there. Part of our role is that to build capacity. We're sort of in the business of putting ourselves out of business, which means it's likely that if I come in as a facilitator, I won't be back, and that's fine, because if I've done my job and the team has worked effectively together, I'm optimistic and I've seen that they can leave that meeting with new tools and new skills for down the road. And if not, they can always come back to ODR with new questions and new concerns.
What do parents think of IEP facilitation? Jill Harinda Patton talks about her experiences with IEP facilitation.
My name is Jill Harinda Patton. I'm the Executive Director of Mission Empower. I'm also a parent of a child with disability and an advocate for families who have children with disabilities. I understand this from both perspectives as being a parent and also an advocate. when you go into an IEP meeting, there could be 10, 12, 15 people from the school district, and it might only be you as a parent, and it's really overwhelming, it's really intimidating, and it's very emotional. It's your own child. So using the facilitated IEP process is really helpful. It'll help you to maybe have your voice heard. Maybe you haven't been able to have a voice as much as you wanted to in the past. It'll level the playing field. And also it's helpful for the school district side too. Sometimes there's just conflict. Conflict just happens between people, and it comes to a head, and you don't know how you got there. Maybe you don't know how to get out of it. And having that extra person in the room can just set the tone and make it a more collaborative way of resolving the conflict. So I really encourage using a facilitated IEP process. Sometimes maybe a school district may think the facilitator is going to take over the meeting or tell them what to do. Maybe a parent feels like there might be confidentiality reasons they don't want someone there. But that's really not the purpose of a facilitator. They're there just as a guide to help the two sides work together, create an agreement, be collaborative. And they don't have any final decision-making, authority. It's all up to the IEP team. They're just there as a coach or a guide. So I really, I think this could be very helpful to really anyone.
Educators also see the value in inviting facilitators to the IEP team meeting. Dr. Mary Beth Gustafson talks about her experiences as an educator utilizing IEP facilitation.
I'm Dr. Mary Beth Gustafson from the Pocono Mountain School District, and I'm an assistant superintendent for special education. I like the fact that school districts and parents have options beyond the due process. So having a third party come in who's objective and who can oversee the meeting, guide on the side, if you will, that is not emotionally connected to the situation is a great option for school districts and parents to resolve those issues before having to go legally and taking legal steps. This is the district's meeting. The IEP team has been reconvened because the district wants to propose an educational program to the parent. So that should be the focus. And I think the facilitator's role is to guide them through that. And the end result is an educational program that's appropriate for the student. And I think that's a great opportunity to resolve those issues, to again have that third person come in and look at things objectively, and again who's not emotionally connected to the situation, could look at all the facts, put it all together, and guide that team towards that goal. Again, it's a great option, and we're fortunate that we have options to resolving issues, and it's a great process and it works, and I would support the whole IEP facilitation I have within our own district, and it's worked very well.
To request IEP facilitation or for more information about the process, visit the Office for Dispute Resolution's website at www.odr-pa.org.
I would encourage anyone who has not participated in a facilitated IE meeting to give it a try. I don't think there's, from my perspective, anything to lose. And I think there's a great deal to gain in terms of learning about what ODR has to offer, about sampling the different styles and skill sets that different facilitators will bring to your meeting. And again, we'll introduce and model some skills that might get this IEP team that much further down the road with the dozens and dozens of meetings that they have in a year's time.